All right, it is 6:05, so we will begin this presentation. Welcome everyone to the North Humboldt Boulevard Public Information Meeting. The project limits are from North Avenue to Keefe Avenue. This is a Department of Transportation and City of Milwaukee Department of Public Works project. I'm Megan O'Connor. I serve as the project liaison for residents and businesses. And before we begin, I just want to go over some housekeeping rules and conditions. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the project website. In the conversation chat box, we do have an attendance form to fill out if you can. It will just help us keep a record of who's in attendance tonight. During the presentation, we ask that you keep your microphone on mute to help prevent background noise. During the Q&A segment, you could hit the raise your hand button if you would like, and I will call on you to speak. Feel free to submit any questions or comments in the chat box, and I will do my best to monitor and respond. Closed captioning is available on the desktop version of Microsoft Teams for those who are hard of hearing. To enable closed captioning, click the three dots at the top of the window and click Turn on Live Captions. Unfortunately, Captions is not available for the web browser version of Microsoft Teams. Alderman Kovac?
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I don't have an exact count, but I just, right before Megan started talking, I hit the people button and noticed there's a huge turnout for this, which is exceptionally good news. I'm glad a number of people found out about this meeting and are present. I'm not going to steal the thunder or the substance from the PowerPoint that the Department of Public Works is going to present. I'll just briefly summarize what's going on here. This is federally funded and state administered money. It's a considerable amount of money, but there's also a considerable local match. And frankly, we don't have to take the money unless we, as the local municipality and the local neighborhood, I think it's a good idea and like the designs going forward. So there's been extensive public process around this to decide whether to proceed with this project and how to proceed with the project. There's been some discussion recently about, how many meetings have we had and how did people know about them? We've definitely done more than the usual amount of outreach, but I've taken some criticism and taken all of it to heart that perhaps we could have done a better job of letting more people know about all of the prior meetings. And we'll certainly during the Q&A take that kind of feedback, or after this meeting, if you want to give that feedback on ideas people have on the best way to get the word out. We did mailings to everyone that abutted the property. We did press releases and social media and e-notifies, but clearly those three things aren't ways that everybody gets notified about everything. And I think a lot of it was word of mouth, and a lot of it was a nice full page spread in the River West Currents that got the word out here. So that's probably a good lesson learned, that we probably should have done maybe a full page spread in the River West Currents 2 years ago rather than just a few months ago. Obviously that's up to the River West Currents, but in looking back on this and getting feedback from so many people wishing they'd known sooner, I'll certainly take any advice and any criticism going forward on how we can best get as many people notified, because this is a very important series of decisions we have to make as a neighborhood about this great, fantastic, beautiful street and how to rebuild it. And so the purpose of this meeting is to do a little bit of review of all the meetings that happened, but we're very close to needing to make a decision, and we pretty much have a recommended decision that we as a city think is the way to go. And so we're going to explain some new data. This project's been going on so long that we had 2 big meetings before the pandemic, and now this is our second big meeting after the pandemic. At the meeting right before this one, the last note we left you all with was we explored an alternative that a number of you asked us to do, which was to create a separated bike lane. And at the time, we thought there might be room to do all that with a limited amount of tree loss. I'm not going to give you the numbers now because that's in the PowerPoint, but we have new data today about the trees and how they would be affected in either scenario, and also new feedback from the Milwaukee County Transit Service about how their service could be affected by one alternative versus the other. So that's a quick summary. If you want to know what's different today than the meeting we had last fall, we have more data. We had our arborists. We went from the term of art is from 30 to 60% engineering. and a lot of new data is now in front of us, which frankly, in our opinion, makes the decision pretty clear. But I'm getting ahead of ourselves because there's a very brief presentation that I know I'll turn it over to Jeff now to present. But I certainly expect there'll be a lot of substantive and process-oriented questions or comments. And we myself and the rest of the city workers here look forward to fielding those questions and answering them and providing whatever information we can about what's going on here and what our options are. So the Commissioner of Public Works is here and is ready to introduce his team and begin the PowerPoint. Jeff?
Yeah, thank you, Alderman Kovac. And yes, we've got a good team here from the City of Milwaukee, DPW, to answer questions about the project. Samuel Medine, the project manager, will be conducting, kind of walking through a brief presentation here to provide kind of a little bit of background on the project, but also the project status as we have today. And as the alderman had indicated, we had gone through a couple different iterations of this. We had come up with a couple different alternatives. We've gone down the path of a particular alternative that included a protected bike facility, while also trying to preserve a boulevard and as many of the trees as we could, by also and this we'll get into a little bit more detail, but and also obviously having the narrow roadway parking and so forth that the corridor has come accustomed to. If I can just maybe just remind everybody to mute their devices that they're logged in with, just so we don't get too much echo or background noise. But it is important to know that as we go through here and as we've looked at this, we have a certain amount of right-of-way to work within. And really over the 4 meetings that the alderman had and other places of input, we did, get a lot of very good comments as to what the various needs of the community were, and we tried to come to an alternative that would provide the most, provide for the most need as possible. But at the same time, it is a certain amount of limited right-of-way that we're working with, and there's kind of gives and takes, and there are some impacts that we need to discuss tonight. And that's part of the status is really, as we've gone through this design, we've done as much as we possibly can to try to limit some of the impacts, but there are still impacts that remain, and in some ways, some fairly significant ones. So we felt it was very important to come back and share that with the community. And obviously we'll be here to, answer any questions you might have. We do have not only within the project team, I know there was a question earlier before the meeting started about the water service lines. And so we do have representation from our waterworks department to be able to answer questions like that as well. So with that, I will have Samuel get into the presentation, and we can go on from there.
Thank you. Again, my name is Samuel Medin. I'm the project manager for this project. I will begin by talking about the project agenda for tonight's meeting. I will give a brief general project information, and then go to talk about a recap of public number 3, and then the next item to be talking about would be the purpose of this meeting, and then we'll after that and then go to the question and answer session, and then The general project information for this project is this is a local road. Functional classification is minor arterial. That classification type is usually based on traffic volume for this particular roadway. The project is 1.5 miles long, and then the type of project is reconstruction. Reconstruction is, as you are all aware, is a total removal of the existing pavement and then replacing it with a new pavement. And then the estimated construction cost would be about $6.5 million. And then 80% of the cost will be borne by federal STP funding. And then the 20% would be a local match. With that, I move on to the next agenda, which is a recap of public information meeting number 3. And then during that time, 2 alternatives have been presented to the public. And then both alternatives meet certain requirements, and then most of our projects will have to meet 3 requirements from the design standpoint, which is condition, operation, and safety. And then both alternatives meet this criteria, and then that is how we came up with both alternatives and able to present that to you back in September 23rd. And then the next slide that you see over here is the existing typical section for the roadway. We have 4 segments in Humboldt Avenue project. And then the first one is North Avenue to Meineke, a very short segment where there is no median. And then the second segment would be Meineke to Center, which is followed by Center to Locust. Again, there is no median over there. And then the fourth segment is Locust to Keefe with 14-foot median. The rest of the information is pretty similar as you see it on the typical section here. Then this is one of the 2 alternatives presented to you back in September. Alternative 1, a typical section. And then as you can see over here, there is 1 parking lane, 5-foot bike lane, and then 10-foot driving lane. And then the median, depending on which segment it is variable between 9.5 foot to 13.5 foot. And this is very similar to the existing layout. The bike lane is between the parking lane and the driving lane, very similar to the existing. The next alternative presented to you was the protected bike lane option. And then we took the bike lane out and then put it between the parking lane in the terrace area, between the parking lane and the tree line or the terrace area. So this design obviously would leave the roadway with 18-foot wide roadway curve to curve face, and there would be a from the curve face to the edge of the bike lane is a 2-foot buffer, and then a 6-foot bike lane, and then there is another 2-foot separation between the tree line, and then on the outside edge is the sidewalk. You may notice on this typical section that the median will be narrowed to 6 foot wide for the entire stretch. As I mentioned earlier, the existing median ranges between 10 to 14, where we have median, and then the two other segments, currently there is no median. But with this typical section, you see that the entire stretch from North Avenue to Keefe Avenue, there would be a 6-foot wide median. So after saying that, the discussion will go to the purpose of this meeting, and then both projects has been analyzed separately, and then as a result, we identified two issues. One would be the impact to trees, and then the second one is essential impact to essential public services. So over here you see a table that shows both alternatives and then the respective impacts to existing trees. And then there is a total of 402 trees within the project limits, plus or minus a couple trees. But and then in alternative one, which is the standard bike accommodation, similar to the existing, there would be an impact to 69 trees, 22 on the east terrace, 16 on the west terrace, and 31 in the median. Percentage-wise, a total of 17% of the existing trees would be impacted with this alternative. And then alternative two, protected by accommodations, again, in the east terrace, there would be 44 trees be impacted, and the west terrace, 37, and the median, 131. All the trees in the median will be impacted. As a result, 53% of the total trees would be impacted with this alternative. So this is a summary of the impact to the trees. And the second concern would be, we'll go to the next slide, and there are some items listed over here, and essential public services would be impacted: snow removal, emergency services, and Milwaukee County transit services. And again, this would be an 18-foot wide roadway, 10 foot for driving lane and 8 foot for parking. And then a typical Milwaukee County transit bus is 124-inch wide, or about 10 foot and 4 inches wide. So the width of the bus has to fit in with the total width of that allocated 10-foot proposed roadway, and then there would be an 8-foot parking lane. So suppose in a winter storm situation, snow would be pushed out to the curbside, and then that 8-foot parking lane would be reduced to some narrower portion of the parking, and then cars continue to park in there, and then a portion of the car will be extended in the driving lane. That means that would be a challenge for the buses to go through a situation like that. Parked vehicles will have to utilize this parking space precisely. By them not getting closer to the curbside and then going into the roadway, again, buses and then bigger vehicles like trucks will be a difficult time into going through. Another situation would be a vehicle breakdown, for example, drop-offs, deliveries, tow truck services. All these services would, when they come to such a narrow situation, it would be difficult for mobility in there. These are the situation that we identified. And then based on the design challenges, the preferred design is alternative one after a careful evaluation of all the situation as I talked earlier. And then alternative one is now, you see it earlier, now you see it again, 8-foot parking lane, 5-foot bike lane on the road instead of being out in the terrace, and then a 10-foot driving lane. Back in the second public involvement meeting, this 10-foot wide driving lane was designed to be 11 based on DOT's requirements. As most of you who were there remember that there was a big opposition to that wider driving lane that was taken out of the median, and then that is in this alternative, we put it back, and then there won't be any widening in there, and then the driving lane remain to be 10-foot wide. So these are the design features that comes with the with this alternative. So improved new left turn lanes will be added, like North Avenue, Center, Locust, Burleigh, and Keefe Avenue. Like I said earlier, we had 3 design criteria that we follow, and then one of the 3 was operations, and then this improvement would meet the all those operational values that that we implement to do the design work, you know, for this for these 5 intersections. And then the second improvement that you will be seeing would be additional medians will be installed between North Avenue and Meineke, and then Center to Locust. And then this is this improvement would give it a continuity for the entire stretch, having a minimum width of median 9.5 to 13.5 foot wide median throughout the entire project limits. The third improvement is signature beds will be planted north of Meineke. Some of you who live in that area may remember there used to be one on that particular location, but it's been removed for probably 7-8 years now due to problem associated with some sewer work. And then as part of the restoration, that signature bed was gone. Now we're putting it back on. Actually, that request came from the property owner who live very close to this location. And then we work with the forestry department to make sure that this signature bed being added. And the second one is south of East Harley Avenue. The third one is east of Chambers. And the last one is south of Chambers, and then south of Keefe Avenue. Planting new trees. And then with this alternative, there would be 81 new trees to be planted. On the east side of the roadway, there would be 19. And then on the west side, additional 19 trees will be planted. And in the median, there would be new 43 trees. Most of these trees will be planted in the newly constructed median section between North and Meineke and Center and Locust. The other criteria, again, we followed is the safety improvement as part of this roadway. And then that is primarily the addition of curb extensions. And then it will be added to 8 intersections. And then Walworth, Meineke, Clark, Hadley, Chambers on the east side, our Concordia on the east side, and then Townsend. And these are the intersections where we're planning to add these curb extensions. and then sidewalk replacement and ADA curb ramps. And then most of the existing, actually all of them now would not pass the current ADA curb ramp standards. So everything will be replaced to be ADA compliant. And then the sidewalk also in so many areas, the condition of the sidewalk would not pass again the ADA requirements, and then most of that will be replaced with no concrete sidewalk. The no LED street lighting and traffic signal upgrades will be taking place. The existing signalized intersections will have an upgraded signal system, and then the street lighting will be no LED lighting in there. And then also drainage improvements. There were a couple locations where we have problems associated with drainage following heavy rain. There are, I believe it is south of Keefe. There was an area, actually we learned about that from a complaint from an area residents, and then there would be some flooding related problem. And then we're adding more inlets in that area, and then the roadway profile design wise will also be improved. And then the entire project limit from North Avenue to Keefe Avenue will have no drainage structures. All the inlets will be replaced with no structures. And then with that, I will go to the final slide, which is talking about the schedule. Most of it is very similar to what you have seen it last time. When we decided to have the lead lateral replacement, as well as develop the protected bike lane alternative, some time was needed, and then we worked with the DOT and then requested a time extension, which we were granted, and then it took them close to 6-7 months to do that. And then finally, we were granted with that time extension to finish this project on time. And then as a result, and the late date of the project is now January 11, 2022. This would give us sufficient time that we believe to begin the project next year in early May, weather allowing even in late April, to make sure that all the concrete work be done in 2022. And then with that, I conclude my presentation, and then that would take us to the question and comment session. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sam. So what we're going to do now is take questions or comments. We'll start with the raise your hand feature. I will call on you in the order that I see listed. I've muted everyone's microphone, so there might be a lag time when I unmute your microphone. So we'll start with Jay Kruger. I am going to unmute your microphone. So now you should be able to unmute it yourself.
I had not requested to speak, so you can go on with somebody.
Okay, David is next. So David, you should be able to turn on your microphone now. David?
David has a comment here saying he's not able, it's not giving him an option to unmute.
Okay. We'll try the next person. I apologize. Let me work on this as well. The next one would be Jacob. Jacob, I'm going to give you permission to use your microphone and you have to unmute it.
It looks like it worked on my end. So
good.
Yeah, I'm Jacob Merrick. I'm at 2310 North Oakland. So I am on the east side, just across the bridge. And I used to bike a lot more. Actually, unfortunately, in this city, I don't feel comfortable as a bicyclist. I have been pulled over by the police while biking in the bike lanes and told to get on the sidewalk because it's unsafe. So I don't know how in alternative one I am considered, or anyone else in my position who doesn't own a car are considered in that design. The ADA guidelines are necessary laws that you have to meet. So I don't understand how that is a marketing, you're basically marketing to us saying, look how much we're going to improve the road because you're legally obligated to do so. Personally, I understand the worry about losing the trees. I really do. A canopy is great for a community. It's beautiful, picturesque, and the houses on Humboldt really benefit from it. But a lot of them are dying or are already dead. And there are leftover stumps here and there across the east side and River West. I've seen them. I think it's time that we get together and decide how to plant trees going forward and replant them so that they are all the same age, they're all the same height, and they can actually form a canopy. I don't know how this is even a discussion. We're talking 80 years here. You're going to sacrifice 80 years of cyclist accidents for the 212 trees that we're worried about losing. I understand that, but 212 trees can be replanted. And I personally don't see any other way that alternative one is useful to the community. And alternative two realistically is the only option that we have going forward if no dual lane bike lane could be proposed. So I really appreciate it, but I think alternative two is really the only one we can go with. So I'm ready to, you can pass me off. So I let out my frustrations, so I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much. I didn't enable everyone's microphones, so now when I call on you, you should just be able to unmute it. So Michael Dentz, you can go ahead.
Thank you. I'm from Milwaukee, went to college in Minneapolis, and being there really awakened what it's like to live in a bikeable city. So I was very happy to see when Mayor Baird unveiled the Path to Platinum initiative and the city passed the Complete Streets policy a year or two ago. And with both of those in mind, I don't see how keeping an on-street alternative really fits into either of those policies. So if the city could explain how they fit the on-street alternative with those two policies, I would love to hear that explanation. Thank you.
Well, I can, and I know we have a couple others here that might be able to answer to this or add to it, but I can certainly talk a little bit about not only the policies, but also just the process in evaluating the project, all the different needs and the various things that we want to accomplish in any one roadway. Obviously, the big umbrella policy that we currently have right now is our Complete Streets policy. And that policy, while in this project wasn't necessarily, I would say that, you know, the policy was established kind of mid-project. And I would say that we are currently trying to kind of work or identify, I guess, the best approach and the best process to apply that policy to our projects and to our operations that we do. When it comes to a Humboldt Boulevard, you know, I think early on in the presentation, it was kind of defined as you would as an engineer as a minor arterial type of a street, and you know, that typically speaks to the type of traffic that it carries. But really, when you look at the street, I mean, it is a residential street. It serves a residential community. It does have a higher volume of traffic in some ways that aren't necessarily destined or coming from that neighborhood. But there is a significant transportation purpose for the roadway, but when it comes down to it, it's a neighborhood that it's traveling through. The roadway also serves public transit, and I would say that there's a significant service to the neighborhoods and the residents that live within the neighborhoods that transit provides for, that public transit provides for. And so, I think when we think about complete streets, it never was to go into it with a kind of this prescriptive menu of how a street would be designed. It really was an approach. It was a policy to help better identify what the individual needs of the neighborhood and the properties that any one roadway served. But also, some of the key things that we were trying to do with that is to provide for a roadway that was as safe as possible for the most vulnerable users. And that did include, not only include pedestrians, but it did include bicyclists as well. That process is a balance. As I started out, earlier, there's a certain amount of right-of-way that we have to work with. And quite frankly, we have an existing roadway that has been established for many, many years with the boulevard and the trees and the kind of the quality of life that facility delivers for those neighbors and residents along the roadway. So it really has been a balancing effort. I think we would have preferred to come up with a way to provide for a protected bike lane or a protected bike facility. We thought we had a good alternative to move forward with. But it really, in the end, and I think in some ways, every roadway is going to have some unique thing, or every reconstruction project is going to have some unique things that we're going to have to deal with. But this certainly is it has provided a little bit of a learning lesson, lesson for us moving forward. But I think the key here is that there are impacts. We had more trees that actually were being impacted. We were able to make some tweaks that minimized some of the takings, but still had a significant amount of tree takings. And these are mature trees that have been there for a long time. Many of the residents, that live along this street or nearby recognize Humboldt Avenue for that very feature. But the other piece of this too is the public transit that's operating on this street. We had some significant feedback from MCTS, and from their experience in similar situations, much shorter segments, but similar narrow situations, a huge concern over being able to provide public transit service on Humboldt Boulevard. And that's a huge problem. Without public transit, I would say you don't have a complete street. And so we really have to look at everything as kind of as a possibility, but we also have to find some compromises to make sure that we're coming up with a street that meets the most needs possible.
Thank you, Commissioner. The next hand is raised is Brent. If you would go ahead and unmute your microphone.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So there's been some discussion online about the total number of trees that would be taken out to do a protected lane. And I don't know if you're aware, but there was an article published recently from a Milwaukee publisher citing that a bike lane specifically would eliminate 258 trees, and that's what's being passed around online. Can we get some data about the total number of trees being removed just for the reconstruction effort, and then the total number of trees to do a stronger bike infrastructure?
Samuel, do you want to go over the data in regards to the trees?
Sure, yeah. I will probably go back to. This is the table that I showed on the presentation, and then the protected bike lane accommodation, which is the lower table. For example, in the median, the entire tree will have to come out from the median, all 131 of them, because the protected bike lane results in a 6-foot wide median in there, and then none of the trees will survive that type of construction changes. And then the remaining would be the 44 on the east terrace, and then 37 on the west terrace, with a total of 212 trees out of the total 402 trees in the entire stretch of the project. So which comes out to be about 53% of the total tree counts.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Peg and Pat, you can unmute your microphone.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you for having this meeting. I'm thankful. Want to thank. I want to say Mr. Samuel for his run through on this earlier. It disarmed me a lot because I used to be a bike racer. I love bikes. I live here in River West, just off of Humboldt Boulevard. You know, I don't live over on Prospect. I live in this neighborhood, and to discard the quality of life those trees add, just go look at Holton Avenue, which I've been a owner of a rental on the street for years, and that street needs a tree. It needs 200 trees. But to think some biker panacea that we're going to cut down all the trees. And I don't really, we live here, I travel that street. I've never seen an accident or an ambulance from bikers. When I ride in that bike lane, I feel safe. Sure, I wish it was 20 feet wide or there was metal railings, but we're in a city. We decide to live in a city. So I'm very happy. I wish no left turn lanes were needed, because the nature of that street shouldn't be to get somewhere quick. Actually, a lot of my questions are not needed right now. I don't feel needed. But one of the things I'd like to bring up, and that's in many parts of this neighborhood also, is the speed limit. Maybe all these changes in the bike lane size and everything is about safety, I think, right? So why don't we make that street 20 miles an hour or 25? I mean, I'm a little bit older now, and I'm not Mr. Speedy like when I was 20 or in my teens, but let's lower that speed limit. Does it have to be 30? Or, and I don't really know what good that is, because I've never seen a police giving a ticket on Center Street or Humboldt Boulevard for speeding in our area. But let's maybe lower the boulevard speed limit. And and that's really all I want to say. The plan it's not as many trees being taken down, and trees are super valuable, so are human lives. So I think you found a happy medium, or a good medium. So
thank you. Samuel, can you give an update regarding the speed limit?
Yeah, the speed limit has been a work in progress. Following the last or the third meeting, there was a request by several residents to consider reducing the speed limit from 30 to a lower number. And then, so at this point, the traffic section is getting ready to work with the Common Council. There is a process to be followed to get that approved. However, they believe, I talked to our traffic section a couple of days ago, which they informed me that it will happen, and then we will planning to reduce it to 25. And then by the time the roadway is constructed in 2022, and then the new sign with 25 will be posted in, and that is what we plan on doing when it comes to the speed signs. And then when it comes to left turn lanes, again, one of the 3 design criteria that we followed is safety. And then I myself live on the east side, Milwaukee side. I drive Humboldt every day, coming to work and going back. And then every time you come to these intersections, and then there is a vehicle, say, for example, making a left turn on Center Street. And then while waiting for opposite traffic to clear the intersection, couple cars would block, and then straight through traffic will go around and then go over the bike lane. And then whereas when you have left turn lanes, then that problem will be eliminated among some of the safety measures taken. Comes with this left turn lanes, and then all these left turn improvements were supported by a traffic report done by a consultant, and then we shortened the length of all these left turn lanes by more than 50% or by a half to minimize the impacts. And then it's like a kind of compromise measure that we took, but that was believed to be a safer, make the roadway a safer alternative when it comes to overall operation of traffic on the stretch.
Thank you, Stan.
And if I can just add, this is Jeff. Yep. The speed limit issue, that is a priority of ours. I mean, we talked about this at prior meetings. And as Sam said, we're moving to get that changed to 25. And quite frankly, this is kind of a similar issue around the city. There are a number of what we would consider arterial streets that have kind of a narrower profile or narrower cross section, have more of a residential feel to them, and 30 miles is just too fast. And we do need to expand upon that priority, not only on Humboldt, but many other streets throughout the city. So that is something that you're going to start seeing as we're moving forward as well.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Kevin. You can unmute your microphone.
Great, thank you, everyone. First of all, thanks for doing this meeting. It's been really informative. I have just a few comments. So I'm at 3234 North Cambridge Avenue, and I think I have the unique position of actually biking the route in question while we are on this call here. And some insights. First of all, Alderman Kovac, I really enjoy your tour of parking structures, and Humboldt Avenue with the parking lane. So the points that I want to make are, I'm down here on Kilbourne. They got rid of parking and the city didn't destroy itself. The businesses are still here. I'm about to go drink beer at Old German Beer Hall. They got rid of parking in front of their business. The city isn't falling apart. I got lunch today at the Crossroad Collective. The Hacienda got rid of parking. They didn't fall apart. I wasn't in the other meetings, but I really think that if you guys haven't looked at reducing parking, as someone who runs this every 2 or 3 days as I'm training for a marathon, I think that getting rid of parking should also be an option. And additionally, as someone brought up, Minneapolis can do this sort of thing where we have bidirectional lanes or have protected bike lanes. Chicago can do it. Madison can do it. Heck, Madison just got in trouble for saying 20 is plenty, and they're really doubling down on making sure that bikeable streets are the priority. And I totally understand the trees. I live in between. I agree that Holton is ugly without the trees, but also Oakland Avenue has fewer trees than Humboldt, and it's fine. And there's a lot of, if we could sacrifice some trees for saving lives and getting more bikers, I think that would be definitely beneficial. And we're basically subsidizing people's right to park on the street. I have a car. I prefer not to drive it. I'm hoping to get rid of it. And we're already seeing that the city can get rid of parking as people go to more transit options. I've recently heard that one of the apartments on Water Street is actually converting some parking into commercial space. So we don't need the parking anymore. And I would hope that you guys look into something like that. That's my rant.
I guess I'll take that one, Megan. Thank you,
Okay.
Kevin, first of all, can you hear me?
Yep,
Thanks for plugging the parking tour. There's 100 people on this call, so maybe if only a few of them heed your call, maybe my next parking tour will actually be full. I give a tour every year, although I haven't during the pandemic, where I point out how there's way too much parking downtown and how ugly that is and devastating that is for the downtown. So I would say we definitely explored it. I'm also getting texts from Caressa Givens on this topic during the meeting, and now might be a good time to talk about some of the internal and external discussions that we had about this. So there is definitely the possibility. I would say, in theory, there's room. We did a parking study and found that there's almost always half the spots available on Humboldt, and so in theory. Now, you don't necessarily want to eliminate all available spots, because then you really are full and there could be an issue there. And even me just saying that out loud now might create more of a backlash from the other 99 people on the call besides you, Kevin. But I would say that we did explore the issue of, could we remove a parking lane and create some room that way? And so the answer is, well, of course we could. And Jeff could, or Sam could weigh in, or Mike's and Jim are on the call too, on the logistics of Humboldt. And I would say there were a few things that recommended against doing that. I mean, none of them were like brick walls that we couldn't do it. We could do it, but I'll just give you some of our thinking on why that didn't rise to the level of being one of our possible alternatives that we fully designed. One is just, and this might not seem like a big deal to a lot of people, but it's just a little bit of aesthetics and symmetry. You know, it's a very balanced and symmetric street now. And related to that is, if we were going to eliminate a parking lane, which side do we do it on, right? And because it is a boulevard, if it wasn't a boulevard, you might say, well, some people cross the street, so be it. And there are certainly streets that only have parking on one side. But it would have been, I think, in the case of Humboldt Boulevard, a challenge. The half of the people that lost the parking on their side would have felt it more acutely than the other half. And again, that doesn't mean we couldn't have done it. It was just a reason suggesting against it. And also, the idea of a two-way cycle track, which is likely what you would do if you eliminated the parking lane. It wasn't, even though it sort of seems obvious that you'd want to then put it on the east side because there's less traffic on the east side. The way you then have your conflicts with your major streets, Locust and North and Center, Burleigh especially, there'd be potential, again, not impossible. It's done in other cities, but there would have been some issues with integrating that two-way cycle track, especially into your major intersections. And I've kind of left probably the main obstacle to the eliminating parking as a solution to this off it to last. And that main obstacle is, we probably would have ended up losing even more trees. We would have basically probably lost half the trees on whichever side we chose to put the cycle track, because it would have been, even though you say, well, you've got that 5-foot lane and you've got that 8-foot or parking lane, but by the time you create enough room and create the buffers, you probably would have had to move the boulevard and or move a tree lane. So you would have likely lost either the entire boulevard or an entire curb lane, or possibly both, depending on the details. So in some ways, the way the trees are positioned, if we decide as a community that preserving the trees are a priority, which in my opinion they are, and I think in the opinion of most people, even the big people who love bicycling like myself and want to see this happen, trying to make such a shift to this current outline of the street was just very hard to do while leaving the trees in position where they are. Other people have mentioned that, hey, there's some extra right-of-way. Technically, there is some extra right-of-way on either side of either sidewalk, but that right-of-way is what most of the people who live on Humboldt think of as their front yards. So even, I don't know if people know this, but technically several feet of most people's front yards is actually city property, but we are not in a position to, or I don't think anyone had a real appetite to say, hey, we're going to pave over people's front yards and put in a cycle infrastructure there. Anyway, that's not what you asked, but I'm just bringing that up because I know that issue's been raised before of people who've looked closely at the right-of-way map. But in many ways, we were limited less by it was not so much a game of Tetris of fit everything in here as it was, if we decide to prioritize mature trees. Because of course, anything we did, we would have, if we moved trees, we would have replanted new trees. But realistically, I mean, to really get the kind of majestic trees we have on Humboldt would take decades, not years. And the prior commenter who said that all the trees are dying, I mean, there are some dying, but we've actually been extremely successful, and those are going to come out as part of this plan, in any plan. If anything the forester deemed to be near death is going to come out. But there's only, I think, a couple dozen of those total. And then emerald ash has been a threat, but we've actually been extremely successful injecting our ash trees. So we have actually saved almost all of our city ash trees, and looks like we can save them indefinitely by just continuing. And we've got a rotation going where we're injecting our ash trees every few years. The forestry department is. So we do want to have, and every time we plant new trees now, we plant a range of species. So whatever the new tree pandemic is, won't kill a whole block. We made that mistake with Dutch elm and with ash. So long story short, it's not a bad idea, but there's just a lot of very detailed reasons about the way the street's laid out that made it hard to execute. Did you have anything to add to that, Jeff?
No, I would say that you pretty much hit on it all there. You know, and it's just, you know, there's again, you know, we really did take a look at, seriously take a look at a number of different alternatives that included higher levels of bicycle facilities, and we thought we had an alternative that we could advance, but unfortunately the impacts are what we presented tonight. And I know, and I don't want, because I know many of the comments here have been focused around the loss of trees, which are certainly an impact to the neighborhood. But there's also, you know, the concern, and this is something that we're going to have some further discussions, you know, down the road here on this. But, you know, how do we best accommodate MCTS and public transit when we're trying to accommodate a narrower lane, a narrower roadway? You know, probably the easiest ways, maybe some of you who are on here may be familiar with a segment of Wells Street that goes through Marquette University. There was a planted median added on Wells Street for a couple blocks, and it's a very similar cross section there. And while that wasn't a transit route to begin with, it was an alternate transit route where if something happened to, because of construction or because of something else going on Wisconsin Avenue, that was a roadway that MCTS used as the alternate route. After having driven on that for you know, a few times or a few situations like that, and in particular during the winter months, it became evident to MCTS that roadway was no longer going to serve their purpose of being able to provide transit, and they now will not use Wells Street because of that purpose. And that was only for a 2-block segment. You know, we're talking about a much longer segment of roadway here that would have much greater impact to public transit. So, you know, while I think MCTS has every intent to make every effort to try to continue service on Humboldt Avenue, the experience that they've had with the small segment on Wells would imply that it probably would be a foregone conclusion that transit would not be able to operate in that narrow of a cross section. So I think this is, you know, the trees are important, absolutely important, but the other piece that we talked about in that transit piece is as much of the discussion tonight as the trees.
Thank you, Jeff. I was notified that David has to leave, and he was the first one I called on prior. The microphone's not working. So David, we're going to jump ahead, and if you would like to unmute your microphone.
Hey, thanks for letting me speak here. Seems to be working. I guess it's pretty clear that I'm not a supporter of alternative 1, and that I think that some form of protected cycle track is really the only acceptable option here. And going back to the MCTS piece, I guess, while I'm thinking about it, I mean, what is their specific reason for not operating narrow right away? And, you know, say we did build it narrow on Humboldt. I mean, has the city ever considered or thought about bus bump outs that a lot of, you know, cities are using? I mean, that could be an option, it seems like. But most importantly, I guess what this says to me someone who's actually been looking to buy a house in River West recently, this project tells me that Milwaukee is institutionally incapable of instituting real reform. And I think instead of looking for a house, I'm going to start looking for a new city that is actually willing and able to build the kind of infrastructure that people are building all over the world. But for whatever reason, Milwaukee always has a reason why we can't do this. It's just a status quo. You guys give us these garbage door zone striped lanes. They're dangerous. Most cyclists don't use them. So I'm going to call. I would say take the lane. Don't use these lanes. They're not good. But, it's not my piece. I hope Alder Kovac takes that to heart, especially since the Millennial Task Force report just came out.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
I mean, we ask why. Sorry, technical difficulties, but I guess we asked why young residents leave the cities. It's because Milwaukee has mediocre transit, serious inequities along racial and economic lines, and we don't have good pedestrian and bike infrastructure. We just don't build it. So I guess that's where I am, and I'm just incredibly disappointed here.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback, David. I've seen some. I don't know if I've seen it. The chat's getting pretty long. I tried to keep up with the chat, but then I wouldn't. There's a lot in the chat, and I know, Dave. I think you sent me an email today, and you also posted a couple things online. Probably maybe more than a couple, but a couple that I saw, and I saw some of the back and forth. Again, I don't think all of it. There are a lot of. When social media is great, and that we can kind of have these real-time conversations, but eventually it creates so much information it's hard to track it all. But I would say, just in general, to the comments you made now and some of the other comments you made online, that I do hope you buy a house in River West or somewhere in Milwaukee. We don't want to lose you. I would concede a number of your criticism or points, about Milwaukee not being the best transit or the best pedestrian city. And I would point, I guess, to some improvements we've made recently and some overall changes we're making internally and structurally, bureaucratically. I mean, on the ground, I obviously would point to most recently the Fratney and Wright greenways. I would point to the paved beer line trail. We now have, the east side had a paved biking trail my whole life and took River West till like 10 years ago to get theirs. And that was a long project in the works long before I was alderman, so I'm not taking credit for that. I'm just pointing out that happened. We got the beer line paved. We did. We also, I think the thing that I'm most proud of, because it was affordable and because it was affordable, it were cheap and quick would be the way to put it. It means that we could use that model elsewhere. I mean, the Fratney Greenway was a unique opportunity with a federal grant. Humboldt Boulevard's another. These Humboldt Boulevard federal grants they only come along once every several generations per street. But what we did on the Locust and North Bridges, I'm very proud of. And we had to experiment a few times till we figured out the right combination of concrete and plastic to get that right. But we put Locust and North Street bridges on a road diet, and there were a few people that worried that it would become traffic Armageddon and the stoplights wouldn't work anymore and everyone would back up. It turns out that having a hurry up and pass on the right lane is just a hurry up and wait lane, and it created speeding, it created all kinds of danger. I'm not going to claim that Locust and North are a complete panacea yet. I think when we do rebuild them, we're going to rebuild them with protected lanes, raised lanes, and maybe even some landscaping on the bridge. We'll see what the engineers say the bridge can support. But I think we are trying to reclaim space from cars where we can. In the case of Humboldt, I mean, we already have, there isn't much space to reclaim from cars unless we decided to make it a pedestrian lane. I mean, the cars are already at a lane so narrow that if we make it any narrower, the buses say they can't run in winter. So I concede the point that it would have been, I pushed on people. I think we're getting now a pushback now from people that weren't part of the process earlier that didn't want to lose any trees at all, because there might have been a compromise here where we could have lost more than 69, but less than 212 trees that maybe I would be supporting, and so would DPW. But it turns out that the decision is kind of made for us by just how many trees we would lose, half. Nobody wants to lose that many. But, there was maybe potential. And I guess what I'm saying in general is I don't think it's going to work out on Humboldt, just given where the trees were and the narrowness of the spaces between the trees on Humboldt as is. But I hope you wouldn't be discouraged, Dave, and others who have made similar comments from thinking that that means the city didn't really give it their best shot on this one and isn't going to find successes in other places. And I can point to successes we have had just in the neighborhood: Fratney, Wright, the paved, the beer line, off street trails, the bridges, and expect big things. I'll put Jeff on public blast now. Expect big things on Van Buren, south of Holton. When that's going to be scheduled for a reconstruct, and Van Buren has way too many lanes and is way too wide and has currently become one of the areas where we've got some serious reckless driving complaints. It's possible we'll be able to do something temporary with cement and plastic on Van Buren, but certainly when we reconstruct Van Buren, it will be a very different street. And there's probably other streets like Van Buren where we can definitely do it, and we will do it. So I guess I'd say don't give up on us just because we couldn't figure it out on this one.
I mean, I thank you for your comments on that. I agree. The beer line's a wonderful trail. I use it frequently, and I hope it gets expanded significantly. But as it is, it's not a real alternative to giving us bike facilities on arterial streets, especially in River West. Like, say I want to go to Pick and Save and buy groceries. I got Humboldt. That's it. But also, I mean, going back to DPW, just had the meeting on Wells Street to propose a very similar cross section of this, minus the median, just the old-fashioned door zone lanes. So I keep seeing this happen over and over. I mean, you guys talk it, but when it gets time to choose an actual alternative for construction, you guys keep going with the low-quality, low-effort ones. I'm just not seeing any real improvement. I've been here 5 years. I was born in Milwaukee. I came back as an adult. I've loved it here, except for the space we cede to automobiles. It's not safe to bike, not safe to walk. Transit's mediocre, But I've said my piece, so I hope you guys strongly consider doing better.
Thank you, David. Next, we'll have Kelsey, if you can unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, so I'm Kelsey. I live on Meineke Avenue, but I used to live on Oakland Avenue at the intersection of Oakland and Webster. And I do want to say that the tree canopy does make a big difference in quality of life. It's much more pleasant and beautiful to go down a Humboldt than it was to be on Oakland. The other thing I want to say is I would like to see turn lanes. For instance, I live on Meineke Avenue. When I'm turning left onto Meineke Avenue, I've got people going around me on the right, and if someone else is trying to turn left from the opposite direction, they can't see the traffic that's coming around me. I think dedicated turn lanes would help prevent a lot of this dangerous passing on the right. And the final thing is, I think I would be sorry to see MCTS depart from the area. That's like a major corridor, people going north-south from downtown. And I don't think people realize, MCTS, if they have an issue getting through, MCTS operates all day. The only hours they don't operate are from from midnight to 4 a.m. So if something that's a minor inconvenience now is actually a 20-hour problem for MCTS. So, I would hate to have the bus drivers put in that situation or discontinue the transit service altogether.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll take Kimberly, if you can unmute your microphone. We'll try this one more time. Kimberly, can you unmute your microphone?
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you for taking my comment. We do live on Humboldt, and we do bike, and we do take the bus. We work at UWM, so we walk or take the bus or bike most regularly to work. And while I agree that it would be great to have a protected lane, I to me, the balance of having the buses be able to run and preserving the trees is just super important. And so I was very relieved to hear that alternative one was more. It looked more like it's gonna be the route that we'll take. And thanks Nick for advocating for bikers, and we love the Locust Street safety features now and use that all the time. So it's all about compromise, and we would all love to have the perfect setting where we could have bike safety and all the things, but it seems like alternative one is the best we can do. So thank you very much. Do you want to say anything else? Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to jump up, and I see that Yves Lapierre has his hand raised.
Hi, can you
Hi.
hear me?
Yes.
Thanks so much. My name is Yves Lapierre. I've been living in River West for 14 years, been in Milwaukee for 20 years, ride my bike everywhere, all over the city. And I know some people may think Milwaukee's not so great for walking and biking, but having been traveled quite a bit and been to different places in the country, I think Milwaukee does a pretty good job. And also think River West is a really great place to bike. And I feel very safe biking everywhere in River West. We have a lot of bike amenities that Alderman Kovac pointed out that have come online recently, and I'm really happy for those. And I bike up and down Humboldt very often, and it seems like we're going to be going with alternative one, which is existing conditions, which I'm really happy about. I really don't want to lose trees. I don't want to lose the look of Humboldt Boulevard. It's really the most beautiful street that we have in River West, and I don't want to mess with success. I did want to just say briefly about protected bike lanes. I'm not a fan of protected bike lanes. I feel when I'm pushed off into a protected bike lane, cars cannot see me. If I'm traveling along with traffic, the minute I get to an intersection, if we each have a green light, the car and me, that car is going to fly right in front of me. And I've had this happen to me on Kilbourne over and over. I do not ride in the protected bike lanes. I don't like them. I don't feel safe in them. I want cars to see me in the street. I am on a bicycle. I am a vehicle. And so I feel like I should be going along with traffic as well. For safety, I don't know if there's an option to do more painting of the bike lane, bright green all the way along. I wasn't clear on that in the presentation, so maybe that's something I'd like to ask. And then the topic of Van Buren being made safer for biking is great, but I'd also like to point out if there's something we can do on the Holton Street Bridge, which I take often, if we can get some painting, striping there to slow down the 70-mile-an-hour traffic that flies over the Holton Bridge. It's been getting a little crazy lately. People are really cruising a lot on Brady, and I live right near Holton Street, so I hear them all night, really speeding, and I've seen it as well. So that's my piece. What's that? Okay, thanks. That's all I got. Thank you.
Well, I would just, this is Jeff Polensky. Your question to, I just lost my computer here. So to your question about the use of green lanes, and I would say that there's probably some variations of how communities utilize those green lanes. I would say that we, our experience with them is we tend to use them in conflict zones to bring greater awareness to motorists of the bike facility if there's a crossover at a particular location on the bike lane. And so it's we do have green bike lanes around the city in various locations, but they're really for those specific purposes, not for just the general, I guess, the general length or the general segment of the bike lane. And then as far as just a real quick comment to the Van Buren, and I think the further extension, obviously, as the Alderman said, we are looking to consider some improvement along Van Buren. But with the Holton Street Bridge, we actually do have a project a couple years out, to say the least, but we will be considering an improved bike facility over that bridge as well. There's certainly excess width along that bridge to accommodate some better facility.
Thanks, Jeff. We'll also call on Joseph Kaltenberg.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Couple things. I just wanted to echo the sentiment earlier about removing parking, even if it's not replaced in terms of functional pedestrian, activity space. The quick math, 1.5 miles of 8-foot wide parking lanes on 2 sides is like almost 3 acres of land that's parking in that stretch, and that just seems completely excessive to me. So even if it's not replaced by something that is like a bike lane or something else pedestrian friendly, that's just way too much in my opinion. So I would echo those comments earlier. And then I guess some of the questions I had regarding the median and like the trees in the median right now. I know there's the idea that we don't want to remove canopy. Most of the trees, and this is certainly not all, but I'd be curious to know the percentage. Most of the trees in the median are smaller trees anyways that wouldn't take decades to replant and create that kind of existing atmosphere that's there. So I would just say that not all of those trees will, if some of them are removed, would be as detrimental as obviously removing a 50-year-old honey locust or something. But and then the last piece was, I'd be curious to know more about like what the city has invested in like the signature beds. I'm all for plantings. I love trees. I'd just be curious to know what it costs to maintain eight beds along the Humboldt Avenue. And that's it.
Hi, Joe. Yeah, this is Jeff. We are fortunate here to have a couple representatives from forestry, so I don't know if Randy or Jim, you want to speak to his questions?
Sure thing. This is Randy Kraus, Forestry Services Manager. So I believe, yes. So alternative 2, I believe it was, removed all of the median trees. Yeah, those are smaller stature trees. But there was a considerable amount of mature trees proposed to be removed in the tree border as well. Some of those very mature honey locusts that have been living there for nearly 60 to 70 years. So that would be a significant impact to that canopy. Regarding signature beds along there, it's, I don't know the full cost of the actual installation and maintenance of those signature beds, but I could get back to you with that data. I just don't have that on hand.
Yeah, no worries. I was just curious in comparison to like, planting, and if those are like annuals that are, require more maintenance, or if they're perennials that require minimal maintenance. I know they kind of vary throughout the city, so I'd just be curious to know what that looks like.
I believe most of the signature beds on Humboldt Boulevard did not have annual flower zones in them. I believe they were all tree, shrub, and perennials. But it remains to be seen, what signature beds are going to be placed back in there. I don't think I've seen a plan on those yet.
Randy, may I interject for a moment, please? This is Jim Kringer, Urban Forestry Technician from the city of Milwaukee. All the trees in the median or the boulevard that we have set up there are not all ornamental trees. There are some trees where I have some elm trees in there. I also have some Balboa ginkgos in there as well. There's other trees that are in a set, and they can get to be mature. And those trees can get to be anywhere from 25 to 30 inches in diameter. We do have 7 diagrams for signature beds that are going to go in and be redesigned. A few of those, if the boulevard remains the width that it is, we'll probably have annual flowers put in. The rest are all perennials that are put in with very little or low maintenance on those as well. And the signature beds that are going to be put in, each of the 4 will also have irrigation for them as well to maintain the perennials, and if we put annuals in as well on those. Another brief thing on the mature trees, the locust trees that we have, go anywhere from 15 to 32 inches in diameter. The entire area consists of primary locust trees. The average age for a locust tree goes anywhere from 75 to 150 years. Any trees on the project that appear to show any sign of disease or dying, which locusts do not have on there, are included in being removed on this project, and they are few. The majority of trees that are dying are in the boulevard, and forestry as of right now has 5 trees in the boulevard that they are scheduled to remove, and they have 1 maple tree on the west side of the street that has been topped out to be removed. All the other trees are in fine and good condition. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy and Jim. Appreciate your input. Leah, if you can unmute your microphone, you can go ahead.
Yes, I want to thank you guys for standing for keeping the trees safe, and this is amazing, honestly speaking. This alternative, trees versus life, is false, because trees are saving lives, and that's a significant difference in the canopy that is between two alternatives. The only thing that I wanted to ask you, and this was asked already a couple of times, but I want to emphasize, maybe we don't need that much parking on Humboldt. And again, it doesn't have to be more on the car drivers. We could consider a couple of parking structures. Yes, that would present an alternative parking, so people don't park on the street. I think I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Rosemary, you can unmute your microphone.
Do you mean Roseanne?
I see Rose. It was Rosemary.
No.
Okay, Roseanne, go ahead.
Well, I'm not sure because I've been called Rosemary. So
no, there is.
Hi, Roseanne. It's Rosemary. I got through.
Hi, Rosemary. You're just a little late. Okay,
go ahead,
I will mute. I will mute, and you go ahead, Rosemary.
Okay. This is Rosemary Oliveira. I live on Humboldt Boulevard, and I have 3 properties on Humboldt up near Concordia. And I really like the idea of the bump outs, because there's been a lot of, as you know, passing on the right. And that's been one of the primary areas. We call ourselves the Tree City, don't we? I mean, so I completely support keeping all of these trees. I think the forestry department, our forestry department, has done a beautiful job keeping these trees pruned, replanting every time they had to take one out. And it really does, it improves our property values. It improves our quality of life. It improves the quality of life of my tenants, my animals. I am very happy to hear that we'll be keeping these trees. I do ride my bike, I take the bus, I do it all. I walk on Humboldt Boulevard, and a protected bike lane is a nice idea. I can't say I don't like it. I do like it. However, not at the expense of removing our trees. And so that's pretty much all I think I need to say. Others have said a lot about it. And I'll also let Roseanne now take the floor.
If it's my turn, I've lived on Humboldt for 28 years. And when I first moved here, I biked a lot. I also took the bus on occasion. And of course I drive. But it reached a point where I did not feel safe biking on Humboldt Boulevard, and I didn't want to put my bike in the car and haul it over someplace else so that I could bike on a protected bike lane. I value the trees on Humboldt, so I appreciate them, and I appreciate how well they're kept up. I'm wondering if extending the curb extensions to a greater distance would eliminate, number one, all of these people who continually pass in the bike lane. I've never had a day go by when I haven't seen people passing in the bike lane. People stop at stoplights in the bike lane. They can zoom ahead of the cars that are in the traveling lane. And so I'm wondering if every block could not have curb extensions to discourage that sort of thing. The other thing I'm wondering is why can't Humboldt Boulevard have speed bumps? Because that too discourages the speeding that goes on Humboldt. Those are all safety concerns for bicyclists. And it's not that I wouldn't want protected bike lanes, because when I've been to cities that have protected bike lanes, it's a wonderful asset to that city. But I also love Humboldt Boulevard because of the trees, because of the the feel of the neighborhood. And so yes, is there a way to slow down traffic and do more to prevent these bike lane passers?
I'm sorry, were you done?
No, those are my questions.
Okay. So yeah, Jeff Polensky again. You know, I would certainly say that the curb extensions will help limit the number of people who are going to be trying to drive, you know, to use that curb lane for an additional travel lane, or trying to squeeze in past somebody in the travel lane, utilizing a combination between the parking lane and the bike lane. And we do when we select the particular intersections that would have a curb extension or wouldn't have a curb extension, it does have a lot to, it has a lot to do with the county transit stops. It does have some to do, you know, with the turning movements and the type of vehicles that might be turning at a particular intersection. So there's a variety of things that we have to take into consideration. You know, and I do think that the curb extensions, they serve, you know, a couple of different benefits. One, obviously limiting traffic from using that curb lane, but also, you know, the idea there is to provide for a pedestrian improvement as well, by shortening the crossing across Humboldt. So, you know, I think we tried to pay pretty close attention to where we could fit as many of them in as we could. We have 8 intersections that will be getting those curb extensions. So, you know, I'm hopeful. You know, I see it all around the city. Motorists trying to use that curb lane. I'm hopeful that this will cut down on a lot of those bad actors.
And Jeff, given either DOT or our own regulations on arterials, minor or otherwise, are speed bumps an option on Humboldt?
Oh yeah, getting right, speed humps, and no. I mean, the simple answer is no. But I mean, there is reason behind that. I mean, there's a variety of different traffic that even though it is generally a residential neighborhood that we're traveling through, you know, there is a balance we need to strike with the design of the roadway given the traffic that's on that roadway. And, you know, one of the primary modes along that is that we've been talking about is MCTS. And it's a much different experience for a bus that has to go over speed humps than on a residential street where we primarily use speed humps for in the slower residential traffic that you get on those roadways, although not always so slow, unfortunately.
I just want to say that somebody had mentioned lowering the speed limit. It doesn't matter how you lower the speed limit. I can drive on Capitol Drive where the speed limit is 30 to 35 miles an hour, and I have people I'm one of the slowest people in the road. If I'm going 5 miles an hour over the speed limit, everybody drives 40 to 50 miles an hour on that street. And there are people on Humboldt that are driving that fast. So how do you slow these people down?
Right. It is a combination of a number of things. I mean, and I don't think anybody is trying to say that we're going to, by changing the speed limit, we're going to simply get compliance to do, you know, for motorists to slow down. It is a combination of the design of the roadway. I mean, I think Humboldt generally is a very narrow roadway to begin with. Adding the curb extensions that will further narrow the feel of that roadway, the ability for motorists to drive that roadway. And, you know, I think just changing the operational aspects of it with the lower speed limit, it will help. It will contribute, but it's certainly not the only factor in slowing traffic down. And obviously there's an enforcement piece to that. I mean, we simply can't put a speed limit out there, but you know, that does give the enforcement arm in our Milwaukee Police Department, who actually have instituted a renewed focus on enforcing speed limits this summer throughout the city. So, you know, I think that can be a contributing factor to trying to slow that traffic down.
Well, thank you for responding to my questions, and I do appreciate these meetings because they've been very informative. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Roseanne. And I think Jeff answered your questions pretty well. I would just add that, you know, especially because of buses and the arterial nature of Humboldt, while speed bumps aren't on the table, I'd say that speed bumps are not always universally popular, even among people on the road. I've had 2 proposed speed bumps on the east side get voted down through postcard referendum, and there, I know there's some people from Gordon Circle on the call here. Gordon Circle, it was proposed, and the majority of people on Gordon Circle did not want them. So speed bumps actually do create, I think, more pushback than some of the other changes, although all the pieces can have some controversy. Some people don't like the bump outs for various reasons, but I think the bump outs are crucial because they prevent the passing on the right at intersections, which is really, when you have serious pedestrian injuries or fatalities, that those cars passing on the right at intersections so often is the cause. And the bump outs, as long as we make sure to build them big enough, Jeff, don't forget to make sure they're big enough, but they can prevent that and really aid the bike lane in being effective. And they've been effective in other streets. And we've got some temporary ones on Fratney and Locust that have worked out really well. They've almost worked out especially well in the snow, because the snow plow just plows it in and becomes like a bump out while the snow's there. So there's different strategies. I'm supportive of the speed bump not the speed bump, the speed limit lowering. I've worked with, as Sam mentioned, I've been working with DPW on that issue here. We'll get that done as part of this. We've done it on other streets like Downer and Brady. But yes, Roseanne, you're right. I mean, just lowering the speed limit without making other changes. I mean, Capitol's a great example. I didn't bring it up because it's not my district, so I didn't want to speak too much about it. But Capitol is a terrible street and needs. It's almost a problem that's in too many different aldermanic districts at once, so it's hard to get a comprehensive solution to Capitol. But Capitol is built all wrong and is incredibly dangerous, and I hope we fix it soon.
Thank you.
Great. Wells, you can unmute your microphone.
Hi, I'm wondering about alternative 1. Is there maybe like an alternative to alternative 1 to have the bike lane on the other side of the parked cars? So, I mean, it would still be a door zone, the bike lane, if there was no buffer. But if you just switched the bike lane and the parking lane, it wouldn't take up any extra space And then I think that would also help with like vehicles passing at intersections on the right, because there may or may not be a parked car there. I think that could work with the bump outs, as long as there's like a cutout in the bump outs for the bike lane to go through. But I just think that that's the best. I mean, maybe I'm like not thinking of something really crucial, but as far as I can tell, that seems like a pretty good compromise. I was just wondering if anyone could talk on that. And also, I think that would help during winter, just with snow removal, because when the snows plow everything into the bike lane, it's useless. So I don't know. I just hope someone could address that. Thank you.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So yeah, I mean, we have done a little bit of that where we've put the bike lane to the curb and then move the parking out closer to the travel lane. And generally, in one good example of that is on Kilbourne in the downtown. But to really create for that to be a safe option for us, you really do need to have that buffer. You know, the one thing, the one difference between having, you know, no buffer, you know, on the driving lane side versus on the curb lane is if a door does open, if it were on the curb lane, the cyclist really has no place to go. There is no other than stopping. You know, at the very least on the driving lane side, the cyclist has the ability to move into the roadway to be able to escape that door from being opened in front of them.
Yeah, I mean, that could be potentially deadly though if you just like spontaneously have to shoot into traffic. I mean, I've encountered that situation many times where I've like kind of absentmindedly shot into the right of way and realized how lucky I was that a car didn't happen to be right there, because I didn't take the time to check, because I like very quickly reacted to the door opening. So, and also there's no buffer with the bike lane adjacent to the moving traffic. There's still no buffer, but yeah, like you say, I guess you could escape the door by going into traffic, but that to me seems worse than just hitting the curb and flying into the grass and the trees. So I don't know. I thought I'd mention it.
One point I would like to make with this option is the moment the parking lane is next to the traveling lane, some of the problem that we talked about earlier would be the situation, including emergency vehicle and other breakdowns and drop-off and other things. And then again, it will impact the passage of the county transit bus. With that type of situation would be some constraints. Whereas the bike lane is in between, there is some space for that for that bus to safely go through. So in addition to that point. So.
Yeah, sorry, if I can say just one more thing. That's another one of the issues where it doesn't really seem like a bike lane if it's convenient for other users to just take it over. Like, for example, for double parking or for bus travel or for cars that pass on the right. Over and over, like the bike lanes, just the cyclists just kind of get squeezed out of the lane that is supposedly intended for them. So I mean, of all those things, I totally respect the emergency vehicle passage, and being big vehicles, they need somehow to get through. But it just kind of reminds us that it's not really a bike lane. It's kind of a bike lane if no one else needs it. Thanks.
Thank you, Wells. We have about 20 minutes till we call the end time of this meeting, when we have about 10 people with their hands raised. So I do want to make sure we get through our list here. And I know with the conversations happening in the chat, it's been difficult to respond to everything. So questions unanswered, we could try to make a fact sheet and update the project website. Marty, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I haven't heard from too many residents yet who live on Humboldt Boulevard. There have been a few. My sense is that there's not full consideration for the folks who do live on Humboldt Boulevard for the precious jewel we have here. I've lived here for 32 years, and for many, if not most of those years, I commuted downtown by bike, and I use the side streets because I didn't find Humboldt safe with or without the current bike lane. So I use the residential streets to get down to where the Holton Bridge is, and then find my way downtown from there. So I'm troubled by the thought that folks who aren't really here, don't really live here, but would like to pass through here, may get an undue portion of the opinion that's being expressed today, because it's true. This is a thoroughfare, but it is also a neighborhood, and I'd hate to see the thoroughfare destroyed or made much worse in terms of the people who actually live here. And in that case, I think I agree a lot with, I think it was Rosemary earlier who had her piece. So for that, I thank you. And Alderman Kovac, thanks for all your hard work. And I'll give it back to you.
Great, thank you, Marty. Jack Holmes, you can unmute your microphone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'll tell you, the reason I don't like the second alternative is because people driving the vehicles are bad enough, but a lot of people on bicycles just cruise through and are not careful either. Now, if you have the bike lane next to the curb and you have to unload your car or get out of the passenger side, and you have bicyclists that don't pay attention, that can be a bad situation. Okay? So that's along with delivery vehicles, buses, emergency vehicles, and delivery vehicles rather, I think alternative 2 would make that a real mess. Another thing, I do agree with lowering the speed limit. And another thing I'd like to see, I live on Humboldt and Auer. I see so many close calls there. I'd like to see that made as a 4-way stop instead of a 2. There's a lot of bad things that go on there. I see close calls and horns honking and what have you. I think that should be a 4-way stop. And another thing, on Locust, the left turn arrow is too short. You can get maybe sometimes 2 and maybe a half car through it. It's way too short. It needs to be lengthened. And also those little things on the intersections that you press a button and it says wait, wait, and then it makes that machine gun sound. You don't have that on Locust and Humboldt. And I walk that way all the time and really need those there to make things safer. So I guess those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. I've made note of your suggestions regarding the 4-way stop at Humboldt and Auer, as well as lengthening the left turn arrow, and we'll reach out to our traffic section regarding your suggestions to review. And in regards to the auditory signals at intersections, I don't know if Sam can speak on behalf of that, or if we have to follow up with our electrical services team if that's part of this project.
Yeah, again, like you said, the other 2 issues we'll have to work with our traffic section to see whether it's doable. The 4-way stop, I mean, on arterial road like Humboldt is, there are signals at some major intersections throughout the project limits, but putting a stop, a full stop on an arterial road probably be a little bit difficult. But again, we'll have to work with our traffic section and then to see whether that's doable. What was the other question there?
Well, we can follow up and just post it on our website once we have the right divisions review these suggestions. Just for time's sake, I want to make sure we try to get through as many people who has their hands raised and waiting patiently. Brent, you can unmute your microphone.
Hello again. So there were some concerns about alternative one that were brought up at the last in-person meeting, I think in the winter of 2019. At that point in time, we were concerned about the left turn lanes and the overall length of them. And that includes cars passing on the right further back, as well as cars trying to swerve out of the way of people slowing in the lane, parking in the lane, all those kind of situations. Basically, alternative one still had a lot of traffic crossing through the bike lane to be able to get where it needs to go. Additionally, there were comments about snow removal in the chat, and I'm wondering if those two things can be addressed. Particularly snow removal kind of in the Kern Park and north of Kern Park area, especially when cars don't move for weeks at a time and snow takes up the entire bike lane.
I can speak to snow removal. Yeah, I mean, you point out a real challenge for us. I mean, and it became very evident this past winter with just the higher volume of snow that we received. You know, if we can't get the cars to move, it becomes very problematic for us. And you know, especially depending on the conditions, every winter is different, every storm is different, and depending on the conditions, if you know we have that wet heavy snowstorm, and then and this happens quite frequently, kind of over a weekend type of thing, over a couple days. We get out, for a snow emergency, we plow one side of the roadway, the other side of the roadway in the curb lanes anyway, and that's kind of the alternate side parking scenario that we have. It gets trampled down and it freezes solid. You get that colder weather that comes in behind some of our snowstorms, and it freezes down solid. And then it just becomes a progressive issue for us throughout the winter. We've tried to take on a little bit more of an aggressive approach. Even this past winter, we tried to take on a more aggressive approach with towing. But the fact of the matter is, it is a struggle for us. It's heavily dependent on parking habits throughout the city, and it is, especially in these situations where you have a bike lane, you do start to see parked vehicles start to encroach in that bike lane. I don't know that I have a clear answer for you, but other than we do recognize it, and we try to mitigate where we can throughout the winter, but it's not always a perfect solution.
I know we have to have time for calls. I got a lot of ideas about snow, and we've had other meetings on that. I'd love to maybe we should have a meeting before the winter just to discuss the changes we've made. And we've liberalized it so you can park both sides if it's not snowing, but if it is snowing, please alternate so we can plow. But the other thing I want to say is I agree with Brent about the left turn lanes being too long. And I hope the engineers don't force us to make them too long, because we lose Boulevard the longer they get. So big bump outs, short left turn lanes was my feedback.
Yeah,
Awesome. Has that been updated since 2019 though?
Yeah, I mean, actually the recommendation to put this left turn lane is supported by a traffic report done by a consultant that we hired, and then I talked about it briefly on my presentation, and then as a result, we followed that recommendation. However, we shortened the recommended version by close to 50%. In a place where they recommend 200 feet long, we shortened it to 100 foot. I believe would that be Clark intersection? That left turn is altogether removed from the plan, although it was recommended by the traffic report. Center Berlin and Keefe, where we currently have no left turn lanes. We'll be adding those. Again, the advantage of this left turn lane would be turning vehicles would clear the through lane for through traffic, so that drivers won't go over the bike lane. Is it going to eliminate all that problem? I don't think so, but it would definitely make a reduction to that problem. So it's a kind of balanced decision as far as the length of the storage bays are. We haven't followed the full recommendation of the report. We did a compromise, and then when the alignment is, the 60% plan will be done within a couple of weeks, and then we will have all that information available to see the alignment for this left turn base. We can have further discussions for some of you have some real concerns with that.
We can share that information on the website and send it as a project update as well. And I do want to thank everyone for their patience. Tim, you can go ahead and unmute your microphone.
I'll keep this short. Just two questions. Is there somewhere a map that shows us where the bump outs will be so we can review that? And then question, you talk about adding a signature bed north of Meineke. I've lived here half a block south of Meineke on Humboldt for 21 years, and about 10 or 15 years ago, there was one there that blocked the sight of people turning left, northbound traffic on Humboldt turning onto Meineke. A lot of accidents, maybe not as many accidents, but screeching brakes all the time. If you're going to put a signature bed there, it needs to be much closer to Wright Street than to Meineke, and it can't be more than a foot or two tall. So please don't do that. It took us last time to get the city to remove that because we were tired of cleaning up accidents. Of that, thank you, and we look forward to construction. I'm glad to have a median in front of my house.
Thanks, Tim. We will update the project website and include the locations of the curb bump outs. And Sam has made note of your suggestion with the signature bed being closer to the right. Jose, you can go ahead. Jose, can you unmute your microphone? All right, we'll go ahead and ask Brian if he can unmute his microphone.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Alice, I'm Brian's wife. I've been a homeowner here on Humboldt for 43 years, so maybe hands down, I'm one of the longest residents that have spoken up. And I'm happy that we've had other residents speak up at this meeting. We've been to all 4 meetings, and the most vocal group of people, freedom to talk, fine, has been the people who are cyclists, and very few of them seem to live on Humboldt Boulevard. So we, the residents, are well aware of all the problems that have occurred on the boulevard. And I myself cycle north and south on Humboldt, have for years, to 3 different jobs downtown, haven't really had any problems. I think it would be interesting, although for another time, to learn statistics of bicycle accidents on the boulevard in the current system of bicycle lanes. That's sort of an aside. But regarding reducing parking, there are so many duplexes, including ours, that are on Humboldt that have no facilities in back to park. In addition, during snow emergencies, people have to find a place to park, in my case on Dousman or on Wheel. So I'm not in favor of any reduction in parking, but I am in favor of a reduced speed limit. As you know, the passing on the right is a long time problem, And it has actually resulted in a couple of rear end crashes into parked cars of my tenants. And so if we can have a bump out there on Burleigh, that'd be awesome. I do have two questions. Is there a possibility to forbid or make a size or length limit on semis coming down the boulevard? We've routinely seen 53-foot semis, and it must degrade the roadway, new or not. And then secondly, my second question is, when will we learn of the amount of the assessment to the residents? And thank you very much to all.
The question regarding the assessments, so far we haven't developed a plan past 60%, and we normally know for sure the alternative that we're going to go to construction with. So by that, what I mean is when we get to 75% stage design, we know for sure we have that alternative being developed into the final construction quality. And then we take the plans and then make our calculations to prepare the assessment letters that will go out to the property owners around the 90% stage, and then that also in line with the public hearing, including those assessments. So if we go with the current schedule, you will learn more about that close to 3 months from now, I would say. So with the assessments. As far as restricting semis, I don't know whether there's a couple businesses that I dealt with regarding accesses to semi movements serving their businesses in there, for example, which is quite the opposite to what you're requesting here. So I don't know, those businesses rely on those deliveries. However, some of the alignment restrict the movement of semis, so that would probably force some of these businesses to use smaller trucks, for example. But I don't know, Jeff, you may have something to add to that. I don't know. When it comes to restricting semi movements in the certain limits of the project.
Yeah, I mean, I think the design that you've been working on, I mean, certainly will create some limitations for larger vehicles. You know, there are, I suppose there is a possibility of seeking, you know, banning trucks on Humboldt. You know, there's a process for that, but obviously, as you know, as Samuel had indicated, there are some businesses along there that do that they would serve. So we would have to take that into consideration as well.
Thank you. I'm going to call on Laura, if you can unmute your microphone.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment that I'm really, really excited about this plan. I know people are not very into alternative number 2, but as a cyclist, I feel like alternative number 2 just looks like it would be really safe for people who are currently cycling, and also give people who might be afraid to get out on a busier street more of a confidence to go out there. I also think that like all of the complete streets plans make the roads into spaces that aren't just so that cars can pass through the neighborhood, but places that we can gather and use and hang out as cyclists and pedestrians, you know, stopping at businesses more, making more purchases, slowing down the traffic. So I am just really, really excited about this opportunity to create more of a safe streets culture here in Milwaukee. I feel like that's a huge problem in every area of the city, and I just feel like having Humboldt Park become this like jewel of a safe street would be so amazing. So thank you guys for having this meeting, and I just really wanted to voice my support for you know, whatever plan you guys choose, just keeping cyclists and pedestrians in mind. I know that like for homeowners, taking down the trees seems like really horrific, but I just wanted to put my support out there for this plan to make the street safer, not only for cyclists, but for everyone who needs to use it. So thank you guys.
Well, thank you for your feedback. We'll have Donald, if you can unmute your microphone.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, I'll try and make this quick. I know you're running low on time. Just a few points here. Some people have said they'd like to eliminate the parking lanes. I as a bicyclist, and I'm lived in River West for 40 years, and I bike. I'm a pedestrian. I drive a car, drive a motorcycle. But as a bicyclist, I like having that parking lane. When I'm on Humboldt, I try and get as close to the curb as I can when I can. I don't just stay exclusively in the bike lane. I always watch my mirrors, and when I have an opportunity to, get in front of the parked cars before, cars pass me, I always get into the parking lane. And there's a lot of people, I don't live on Humboldt, but I don't think it would, I'm sure that they wouldn't be happy about losing that. As far as the bump outs go, I'm assuming that these won't go into the bicycle lane. That yeah, okay, I see a head shaking. No, I disagree with Kovac. A lot of times I don't care for bump outs as a bicyclist because it pushes me out into traffic. But in this case, I guess it sounds like it's something that that probably would be a good thing to do. Alternative one seems to be the only realistic alternative. People have been talking about the buses. It's not just the buses, also the garbage trucks, moving vans. You just need that space there. It's just unrealistic to not have more. It'd be great if we had enough of a corridor to have a dedicated bicycle lane and totally get you out of traffic, but we just don't. And there's always the side streets. I haven't heard too many people say that. I think one other person commented, Wheel runs parallel to Humboldt almost the entire way other than Blifford. And if you don't want to be on Humboldt, I've never really had a problem there. Usually it's not that busy, but I know it can be. But at those times, sometimes I've gone on the sidewalk for a short period of time or go over to another street. And also, is there any reason why you couldn't connect with a blacktop path, the two Dousmans, the 3100 block to the 3200 block behind Kellner's? I live east of Humboldt, and I'd be more likely to take Dousman if there was a blacktop path. I assume that that's the city's right away to Dousman. Right now, there's just a muddy path there, and I was just wondering if that would be possible. That's it.
Yeah, I'm not, this is Jeff. I'm not familiar with that segment of Dousman. I mean, I'm familiar with Dousman, but just that segment, I'm not sure if that is public right away or not. It's probably private property, I would think.
I know the area is talking about it. I walk it, and I'm not actually sure who owns it. I will we should check into that.
Yeah, we'll look into it.
Nancy, you can unmute your microphone. You got it.
Technology. I hardly know where to begin. There's just so many questions. There's an overview. I'm getting feedback, so I'm having a hard time. There's an overview that's been missing, and that is a plan view of the proposed boulevards in any plan. I think if the bikers would realize how close in Plan 2 that the bikers would be to pedestrians, it would not be safe. If there are people walking dogs, many people in River West have multiple dogs, and they are right next to the bike lane, it won't be safe. I mean, it'll startle dogs. If you're walking with two little children, there isn't enough room. It's just it would be unsettling for elderly to have somebody whizzing by you. I think that to position this as people at cross purposes and enemies is wrong. I mean, we all bike. We are not against biking. We love biking. We love the idea of reducing cars. But as Don said, you're trying to put 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag. We just don't have the space. And we have a traditional, lovely boulevard that has been in this area for many, many years that it can't be replaced by tiny trees. The ecology of the environment benefits greatly from the trees, as well as biking and less cars. We're going toward the same thing. And I think it's a disservice to pose ourselves as enemies because we want the best for River West. And I would really like to see plan views before anything is decided, because I think that it's unrealistic to make a decision based on these sections. They don't show the true nature of the relationships and the bump outs. And if I'm reading this correctly, and I'm not sure, but if you do put the bump outs in by your own schedule, if you do one side of the road at a time, you do the first part and you put the bump outs in, there's not going to be room for two-way traffic on the other on that new part. When you do the other side, there's not room for two lanes of traffic, trucks, buses, fire trucks to go. And that goes for future repairs. So I don't understand that. I don't understand how how the Plan 2 bike lane works. Nobody ever explained how you make a left-hand turn from a raised bike lane across traffic. It looks like you would have to stop at every corner. I don't think bikers would like that. And I think the whole reason that bikers like Humboldt is because it is beautiful and shaded and lovely. Otherwise, they'd take other streets. And for the dedicated new roads that are in River West, they're horrible. They have speed bumps that you practically have to stop and to get over them. They're enormous. I don't see any bikers on those roads. And I've gone on it many times just to check. So I would like to see plan views. I'd like to see details. And I'd also like to know, according to your schedule, this portion of the design planning goes to the end of the year. Is that not true? Thank you. And thank you all for your input. It's been really interesting. Thank you.
Well, I do think we could look at scheduling a pre-construction public meeting where we could include aerial maps and more design plans for you to review. And hopefully that meeting will be in person at that time. And Sam, can you go over the schedule one more time with final plans?
Someone will have to mute their mics. So the project, as scheduled, final plan will be completed by August 1st, and then the late date would be January 11, 2022. A couple issues that you raised, the construction of the bump outs. In the first stage, we have the draft discussion for traffic control. So there would be some similar to like saying 3 stages, and then in the first stage, we won't be constructing the bump outs so that we can have room for two-way traffic during stage 2. So they will have to come back in stage 3 and then do the bump outs in stage 1 so that it wouldn't affect two-way traffic during construction. The plan view that you'd like to see, I believe it is for the protected bike lane option. As it is, as the typical section shows over here, the protected bike lane plan, there is a 5-foot separation from the sidewalk. Also, the tree line in between. But when you get closer to the intersections, then the protected bike lane and the sidewalk would come very close to cross over side streets. We do have the alignments. We can make arrangements for you to take a look at it at some point. I don't know whether it's Megan, our desire to put it on the website. I mean, it's 1.5 miles long. We can put a portion of that segment in the website for you to take a look at it. That's another option. So making a left turn at intersections, it can be done just like people crossing intersections. And then when you come to the intersection, you'll have to stop your bike and then cross the street to the other side with pedestrians when it is green light to cross over the street. That is one scenario that I'm considering. And then another would be to merge with traffic, make a hand signal with the traffic, and then use wherever there is left turn lane. They may have, well, that wouldn't work with the protected bike lane. That would only work with the on-road bike lanes. So again, we will talk to Megan about it and then find a way to share the plan view of those alignments with you if you want to take a look at that.
Wesley, you can unmute your microphone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to say, have there been any thoughts? One, have there been any thoughts to building a bi-directional bike lane on the east side of Humboldt Boulevard? And specifically, you could preserve some of the parking by having a sort of zigzag and only cutting down like about 2 trees and having the bike lane go next to the sidewalk for a short duration and then come back out to about roadside. And the other idea is, do we even necessarily need bike lanes on Humboldt at all? And should we just focus on pedestrian safety and maybe investment of raised intersections and continuous sidewalks on Fratney Street instead? Thank you.
Unmute. Oh, there we go. I can maybe just take a little bit of that. You know, I think we looked at you know, a couple different versions. I mean, I think the two-way bike facility on the east side, you know, that kind of gets at a little bit of the crux of the problem that Alderman Kovac had talked about earlier about eliminating, really eliminating parking on one side of the street. You know, I'm not sure. I suppose that you could maybe try to balance, maybe by not having as linear of a route, by, you know, maybe trying to balance some proportion of taking of trees and some preservation of parking, or the other way around. I can't say that we looked at that as an alternative during that time, but it really does kind of get down to you know, which side of the street would end up without parking or a significant portion of the parking removed, which I think has some challenges from a neighborhood standpoint.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to offer a last call on Jose to unmute his microphone.
Yeah. Can you hear
Okay.
me now?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm on phone audio and I didn't realize that was muted instead of my computer. Anyways, I'll be quick since we're way over time. Thank you guys for having this meeting and the various meetings throughout this process. I guess I would say, it seems like alternative one will be the one chosen. I'm disappointed, but not really surprised. Alternative one is the safe option. It's more of the same. It's more of what we've been doing for a long time now, and what many other cities have realized doesn't really work. It ignores the safety and the needs of cyclists, and not cyclists that are confident and able-bodied, but really it ignores the people that need the safety the most, the people that aren't necessarily as comfortable on a bike, the people that would maybe bike if there were protected facilities, the people, young people that, parents maybe want to take out their kids and don't feel comfortable doing it on a bike lane like alternative one. So I guess I would really just say that obviously I support alternative two, or, there are other options and they've been raised throughout this meeting, whether it's a two-way cycle track, removing parking. There are other designs that other cities use to provide sufficient bicycle facilities for the most vulnerable people that want to bike, and alternative one doesn't do that. It's not sufficient. It might be up to standards and codes, but those are hopelessly outdated in this country. So while it seems like alternative one will be chosen in this design, I hope we're rounding a corner, and I hope that other streets moving forward actually properly consider the needs and the safety of cyclists instead of just doing more of the same. So thank you guys, and thank you for bearing with us for a very long meeting.
Well, thank you. This has been a great turnout, and we appreciate hearing from all of you. I do know that there were questions unresponded to in our chat box. I do apologize, but we will take those questions, provide answers, and update them on the website, and send out an email to all those who've signed up to receive updates from this project. This meeting has been recorded and will be posted on the project website in the next day or two. I would say that formally concludes this meeting. Jeff or Sam or Alderman Kovac, if you want to say any last words.
I think we've talked enough, but just thank you everyone for your patience and for your involvement, and please stay involved in this project. We're nearing a critical decision point, but there's lots of little details we still need to work out. So please work with us on those.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.